Hello and welcome back to How to Change the World. I am Catherine Alonzo. I am so excited that you're here because today I'm sharing with you this incredibly special conversation with Reyna Montoya. Reyna is a friend of mine. She is a social entrepreneur, a DACA recipient, a community organizer, an educator. She runs a nonprofit and she's a dancer, so she has many, many talents. And Reyna has received very well-deserved awards and recognition for her advocacy work as it relates to immigration, and she has driven incredible change, not only locally on the statewide level in Arizona and also nationally. But the reason that I was excited to interview her and the reason that I just love this conversation is what you will hear is that what drives Reyna's work is a true passion for the work that she does that is really related to her personal experience and inspired by family and the young people that she works with, but also her founding belief that people are human first and that all of us are human people and that we should be treated as such and have opportunities because of who we are as people and not what our immigration status might be. She is the founder of Aliento, which is an organization that serves undocumented, DACA, and mixed immigration status families to transform trauma into hope and action. They are youth-led, and they're also led by people who are directly impacted and allies who are invested in the well-being, emotional healing, and leadership development of those impacted by the inequities of lacking an immigration status. And you will hear about her successes, about her lessons along the way. And really, I think the through line to our entire conversation is just how genuinely held Reyna's passion is for the people that she serves and the vision for what she wants to be a part of. So without any further ado, my incredible conversation with Reyna Montoya. Reyna Montoya, welcome to the podcast.
So good to see you.
I am so excited to be talking to you today. I've wanted to do this for so long, and I'm so grateful to you for taking the time and sharing all of your wisdom with us. So thank you so much for being here. And to start us off, I'd love for you to just tell me a little bit about yourself and the work that you do today.
Yes, thank you so much, Catherine, not only for inviting me, but for all the community work that you do here in Arizona and beyond. My name is Reyna Montoya, the daughter of two incredible human beings who happen to be immigrants. They had just celebrated their 18th birthday a month before they had me. So I think that really informs not only the work that I do, but being grounded in like who I am and where I come from. Both of my parents were, as I mentioned, very young when they had me. I'm the oldest of three kids. All my siblings are significantly younger than me. So my brother is 7 years younger than me and my sister is 17 years younger than me. So definitely I've learned a lot about what it's like to usher your family and your community just by the fact of my positionality of where I was born. I'm also the oldest granddaughter in both sides of my family. So that was a huge, big weight on my shoulders. So something that I always like to share about my family. And growing up, there was a lot of confusion as a child. I was born in Mexico, only 15 minutes walking distance from the U.S. side in Tijuana. And when I was in the 5th grade, I had my first internal migration from Tijuana to Nogales, only 3 hours south of the Phoenix metropolitan area for those people who are oriented in Arizona geography. And I like to say that for technically 3 years of my life, I lived in the in-between space. So my mom would pick me up after school on Fridays, and we would drive to see my dad because he moved first to Arizona before us. And then at 4 a.m. in the morning, we would drive back from Chandler, Arizona, all the way to Nogales. And I would be dropped off in front of the school. So education was not something that my parents would necessarily explicitly said that you gotta go to school, but they made sure I made it to school, and it was an important value in the household. And being my parents that they didn't have the opportunity to go to college, that was something that was really instilled in me at a very young age.
Yeah, for sure. And how, by the way, I was thinking when you were saying that you were the oldest granddaughter, I was like, you were born to be a natural leader. If you're like the oldest daughter to young parents and the oldest granddaughter on both sides, like I think that your fate was sealed. You were always going to be a leader with that kind of conditioning, probably. And so then how did, from that point in your life, those experiences, living on both sides of the border, learning on both sides of the border, how did that instill in you what you do for work today, and what do you do for work today?
I am the founder and CEO at Aliento. Aliento is a nonprofit organization that works in the intersection of education, mental health, and the arts through like a systems level change. So we also do advocacy, not only programming. And our whole motto is to transform trauma into hope and action, where we really imagine and work in partnership with the directly impacted community that are lacking in immigration status, mainly from a children and youth perspective. To really transform all the pain and all the fear that it comes with one, yourself not having the proper documentation, or a loved one. Just to put it into context, there's 22 million mixed immigration status in the US. That means that about anywhere between 6.5 to 8 million children under the age of 18 are living with someone in their household that is undocumented. And the majority of those children and youth happen to be born in the United States. So when we're talking about immigration, for us, it's really imagining a world where children and young people don't have to worry about the status of their parents or themselves in order to thrive. So what would the world look like if immigration was not a barrier for their success? So that's the work that I get to do every day. I am so privileged to do that. And the way we do it matters. And for those that might not speak Spanish, Aliento translates into breath. But when you give aliento to someone, it's like giving words of encouragement. And that really came about from my own unique experience of growing up undocumented in the state of Arizona as a child, being confused, not really knowing why we had migrated. After way many years later, as I was an adult and coming of age, when my dad was in deportation proceedings, that I learned the real reason of my migration. And I felt that all my life, I had been missing this one unique piece of a puzzle that really was confusing, and it created so much pain and anxiety. And that was that my dad unfortunately had been kidnapped by Mexican police. And that's why we had to leave everything and so quickly, because there was no safety. And my dad had to make that courageous decision to migrate for the safety of our family. And I get emotional because I think about what would have my life looked like if I would have had a supporting a school system that really that saw me beyond my accent, that saw me beyond the biases or the perceived notions of being an immigrant, being foreign. What would have looked like if other people would have just embraced me and see my talent beyond that. And that's what I get to do the work that I do, because when I see young people, I not only see a bright future, but I see the beautiful asset that it comes to be bilingual or trilingual, and them having this understanding of moving as translators with their families, that's not a deficit, but that's a beautiful asset. Like, our young people are already the bridge builders and the leaders of their communities. And if we work to invest in that potential, I deeply believe in my bones that we will have a very different community where empathy and understanding would be the leading force.
Well, and that dovetails so beautifully in what I wanted to ask you next, which is your vision for what you can create through your work as an individual, as an activist, as an advocate, and with Aliento. When you think about those kind of what if statements, what if this world had been different for me? What is this what if world that you imagine for other people in the future?
I have been so lucky that I have actually seen what it's like when we support young people. Prior founding Aliento, I was a classroom teacher, and I got to see the power of storytelling and just asking, who are you? Where do you come from? But where do you want to go? I remember back in the classroom when I was a teacher, a lot of my students were afraid. They didn't want to share about their identities, their experiences, because they were afraid of being judged. And they were afraid that their potential was going to have a stopgap. But what I got to see is that my students were so powerful. I taught English, Spanish, philosophy, and dance. So I had all the preps of the world for those teachers who might be listening or former educators. And it was so beautiful to see in one of my Spanish classes that one of my students came out as an undocumented student through a poem. And that was so powerful because he had never shared that story. And he felt that something that was so painful, he was able to transform that into something that was empowering and that he felt a sense of pride. So for me, as I do the work that I do on the daily times with a lot of ups and downs of society, I often see the world from that lens of a child about what would have looked like for me if I would have been supported, but also what I have witnessed now as an adult when we support young people. Like some of our students have gone into do incredible things. They're like at Harvard, they're at law school, they are working for congressional offices. And what I think that is really beautiful is that they're not only thinking about themselves, but we're really instilling that value about paying it forward to the next generation. So a lot of our alumni students that have graduated through our programs are coming back to serve the younger generations. And I think that that's what life is supposed to be about. It's not supposed to be about what makes us different, but it's like, how do we embrace each other with those differences and create spaces of where everybody can belong and can contribute whatever that is.
Yeah. I love that so much. And I love the way that you really talk about how the vision for your work comes through in many ways through the eyes of a child, and in sort of two ways, like what might be missing and the harm that causes, but then what's possible when those things aren't missing, and what adults are capable of when they have that experience as young people and as children. And I love that. I think it's a really powerful way of building vision. And so from that vision that you have, what are your goals? How is success defined? How do you know in the short term and the long term that you're being successful in your work?
That's a great question. I feel that success can be a really scary word when you're doing this work and when you have a big vision, but then it's like, how do you quantify it? And how do you make sure that you know that you're trending positive? So for us, it has always been like a twofold strategy. It's like, how are we ensuring that we are impacting the lives of our young people? So we do that through going into schools, through doing community programming. And the way that we define our success is, are we connecting with young people? Do young people have a sense of belonging? Do young people feel that they are more resilient, that they have agency, that they have voice, and that their voice matters? And then we take that from the way that we say it internally at Aliento. How do we make sure that our young people know that they're not only the storytellers, but the strategists of their lives? So we actually take them to the state capitol and we give them opportunities for them to engage directly with elected officials to let them know, hey, my name is X and we're here from X school, all together with 300 students to share with you about what we care about in our communities. And you are a leader, so what are your solutions? So for me, that's the ultimate testament of success, when you have a young person feeling that they're not alone and feeling that their voice matters and that they can do something about it. Because we're living in a society that is not only divided, but we're constantly criticizing what's not working. Yeah. And we need to move beyond that. Yes, awareness of the problem is the first step, but how do we move towards solutions? And solutions have to center our young people, who I believe that they're not only our future, but they're our present. So that's how we define success at Aliento. That's one prong approach. And the other one, it's really thinking through what are those barriers that are creating fear and trauma and pain in our communities, and how do we create a coalition that is centered on children and young people, but that they don't have to do it alone. Because unfortunately, we know that immigration has become so partisan, has become so polarized, that we forget that we're talking about human beings. Yeah. And for us, that's where we really need to do the work, that yes, there are policies and barriers that are creating so much division and pain, but it doesn't have to be that way. And for us, it's bringing that hope and that actionable step to say, you can do something about it. You don't have to be an immigrant. And this impacts you and your community, and you have a role and a choice.
Yeah. And when you think about the work that you've done so far, what are some of the successes that you're really proud of to date?
Yeah, there's so many successes that I'm like so proud of our young people. They keep me on my toes and they keep me moving for sure. But I would say that two of the most recent ones was winning in-state tuition for Dreamers here in the state of Arizona. I was a junior in high school when in-state tuition was taken away, and it took more than 15 years to undo that. And it was through the stories, the dedication of our youth that were able to work together in a nonpartisan way, bring Republicans and Democrats to the table to ensure that they would do something that is called a legislative referral and put it in the hands of Arizona voters. So Arizona voters in 2022 decided to ensure that Dreamers had an opportunity to pay the same tuition as any other young person, as long as they have graduated from an Arizona high school. And for me, yes, the policy was great. It was a big success. But for me, the way we did it really mattered because it took time. And it wasn't the first try that we got it done, but it also took partnership, and it took understanding, and it took education, and it took so much courage from our young people to go to elected officials and say, this is my story, and this is why I want to change. Or, hey, I'm actually a citizen. I go to Brophy College Prep Academy. I'm fully here. I'm a citizen. I'm white, but my peer is undocumented. And I don't think it's fair for my best friend to be paying something different than me. So for me, that was the beauty about how solidarity really came to life, and that it was about our young people at the end of the day. But then we had faith leaders, business leaders, and Arizona voters behind our young people who said, this is a solution that not only helps Dreamers, but it helps Arizona's workforce, it helps Arizona's prosperity, and it helps Arizona's education attainment goals.
Yeah. I want to linger on this a little bit because I think it's such an important example of one of the things that I think gets missed in change-making work a lot, which is that there is a lot of failure on the way to success, and that any kind of change in our society and our systems level change is hard fought. Like, it does not happen easily. And I think that when something like Proposition 308 passes in 2022, a lot of people who maybe vote or read the story or go to the election night party maybe don't know about all of the years and years and years that goes into making change like that. So I'm wondering if you might be able to share with us a couple of sort of moments along the way where maybe you lost hope, and then what did you do in those moments?
Thank you so much for that question. Yes, change, it doesn't happen overnight, and it takes a lot of sacrifice and a lot of eagerness to keep going, because it's not a matter if you're going to see failure, you're going to experience it. It's just a matter of when. But I feel the definition of character is how you persevere beyond that. To put it in context, we first launched the campaign with about 100 students at one of the events in 2018. So it took us from 2018 to 2022 to close the deal. Before that, our first legislative cycle that we were talking to elected officials around this issue was in 2019. And then we were able to pass it in the Senate, but it never got a hearing in the House. So in order to have a legislative referral, you have to have both chambers agree, and then they put it in the hands of the voters. So the first ideation, it was not even in-state tuition. It was just a graduate tuition rate that would have been about 150%, because we hadn't made the case. As I mentioned to you, it had been years, over a decade, that this hadn't been possible, and people actually had forgotten about it. I mean, we were doing presentations all over Arizona, and people didn't know that this was a problem. So it was about creating that awareness, like waking up at 5 a.m. in the morning to drive to schools to prep students before they start school at 7 a.m. It was going to Sunday masses and Sunday churches to really engage older generations and letting them know, hey, like, did you know that this is happening in your backyard? So it was a lot of dedication. And even though that we did all that work, we weren't successful. And we came back the next year in 2020, and we were getting really close. So this time we started in the House rather than in the Senate. And then the pandemic happened. Yeah. So as you can imagine, we all went on rapid response, emergency creation, trying to figure out what was essential. But during that time, it was really hard because a lot of our students didn't have that support. They didn't have internet. They didn't have that infrastructure, that there was moments that even the students would be like, why are we here again? Why do we keep trying if people don't like us, if people don't want us to be here? And hearing someone who's 18, who's 16 years old saying that breaks your heart. Yeah. And that's when I had one of my biggest moments of doubt. It said, like, am I really supporting young people at this moment? Or am I breaking their heart by exposing them to the complexities of our world? So definitely that was one of the times that I really started questioning myself and figured out if this was the right pathway forward. But after that, I like shook it off and I just had a conversation with them, because this wasn't about me. This wasn't about Reyna or Aliento. This was really about what young people wanted to do. So I posted the question right back at them and said, yes, this sucks. Yes, we're not getting what we want, but we can either give up or we can keep trying. You tell me what you want to do and I'll support you no matter what. And the young people said, let's go. So we went.
That's amazing. How inspiring that is. Well, I want to ask you more about the people at the center of the work. But before I do that, I'm going to take us to a quick ad break and we will be right back. Ever had a book or movie ruined for you because of a bad ending? Yeah, us too. Around here, we believe that storytelling can change the world. And what makes or breaks a story? The ending. That's right. In order for people to care about what you are doing, they need to understand why it matters, what kind of world you're creating in the end. We call this your why. And at Javelina, we're experts in helping our clients not only find their why, but build an entire brand and marketing strategy around it. Visit javelina.co to sign up for a free consultation for our branding and messaging services. And let's bring your why to life. So we are back with Reyna Montoya talking about her incredible advocacy work. And you just shared so much already about how vision and having concrete goals really help to channel and help to drive forward your change-making work. What I want to ask about next is the people at the center of your work. So when you think about who your work is for, do you have someone in mind or people in mind? Are there people that you sort of visualize when you're thinking about who this is all for?
I definitely think about little Reyna when I was in the 8th grade, when I first migrated, and how powerless I felt, how I felt so isolated, how I felt that I was being stripped away of every single opportunity, and that no matter how hard I would work, it was never good enough. So I think about that younger version of myself, like really rolling up in my room and feeling so defeated. And I also think a lot about the students like that when I was in the classroom. I think about my parents and their determination. I think about my sister, who's 17 now, and I think about her and the world that I want to see for her. I think about my fellows, my students that teach me that there is always a new possibility. So oftentimes when I think about who do I do this work for, I reflect that it's not only for them, but also for a younger version of myself to heal my inner child. And I also think about that I am doing this work with them because they're not helpless. They are so powerful and so bright that I just want to be that adult supporting them and cheering them on.
There are also lots of different people that you have had to engage in your work with Aliento and your advocacy work across the years, and lots of different audiences with lots of different starting points. And so how have you understood who those audiences are and what you need to say to each distinct audience to bring them along the journey?
I think my upbringing of being a kid who had to be bilingual and navigate two different worlds all the time really came handy. And I also think that being a classroom teacher, oftentimes when I think about the people that were engaging, I always see their humanity first, because if I am advocating for education equity, if I'm advocating for the rights of undocumented people in the immigrant community, I think that how we do it matters a lot. If I am really want folks to see our humanity, I have to see theirs. And that's the starting point. Every single person is human first. And you have to acknowledge that not everybody has the same experiences. So that's when I really tap into my teacher hat and my translation hat as well, because I think about it as a teacher. I can be giving 12 reading material to someone who's in the first reading level, right?
Yeah.
So I always think about, okay, if I am talking all this terminology that people don't know and they don't understand, we're speaking different languages here. Yes, it might be English, but it's not a place where we're meeting people where they're at. So I think that an important value of ours has been about how do we meet people where they're at and give them an invitation, because at the end of the day, I think what's going to be successful not only for Aliento, but for the United States of America in reality is that how do we engage with one another? How do we treat ourselves? And how do we learn that people have different experiences and walk of lives? And there are things that make us so much more similar than different, but we're fixating on the differences rather than focusing on, at the end of the day, we all go to the restroom. At the end of the day, we all drink water to survive. So how do we make sure we start from that starting point of humanity and ensure to look at what makes us stronger, which is that shared humanity and those shared experiences, even though that we might have different starting points.
Yeah. Well, and I want to ask you about that idea of that we're all human first. I just love hearing you say it. I think it's so important. It gets lost in so many of the conversations around our critical issues today. And as we're recording this in the run up to the 2024 presidential election, which is so important not only for the United States, but there's global implications of that election outcome as well. And immigration is going to be one of the most important issues discussed. It's going to be one of the issues that's important in how people decide to vote, and it's going to get a lot of airplay in ads and conversations between now and November. And I wouldn't say in the conversations and the narratives that I've witnessed that human first is really the prevailing narrative when it comes to this issue. And so how do you see immigration playing a role this year? And also, how do you on an individual level navigate such negativity as it relates to the issue? And it's so politicized, as you said.
Yeah, it's definitely challenging to wake up every day and seeing in ads that are talking about a community that I come from and that I deeply care about, and seeing the disconnect. I feel that if you look at history and you reflect, unfortunately, it's something that we have seen immigrants being a scapegoat for so many other different issues. Every time that the U.S. has been in pain, we have created very uncalculated and harmful policies that are hurting people. And that can be overwhelming as a human being to just see that every single day. But at the same time, I feel that there are very few people that are crafting these messages and that are using people's pain to to really blame and shift the blame rather than solving problems. So I try to remind myself of that there is very few people that feel that way, because that's not the reality. When I'm having a conversation with my neighbor or someone at school or someone at the grocery stores, it's not a conversation that it comes about if you bleed red or if you bleed blue or if you're anti-immigrant or pro-immigrant. It's really about connecting. And for me, that's what I try to remind myself, that if the only narrative is what it's being done in the ads, in the political campaigns, we're losing, because that's something that I feel that's part of the strategy. They want us to be so divided. They want us to be so hopeless that we're not engaging. So for me, it's really critical that at the end of the day, one, I have a deep understanding of the historical context of the U.S. and immigration policy. Two, that there's a huge myth that immigration is a Republican or Democrat issue, that both parties have been guilty of inaction and both parties have benefited from not solving the problem. And number three, that the American people is with us. The majority of American people want common sense solutions. Of course, whenever they feel fear, whenever they're fed these messages, they're going to feel afraid and they're going to want to be protective. So understanding that really allows me to engage with other people that they might not be seeing to eye on what is the solution forward, but it's really understanding that I want to meet that person where they're at. And if I want them to hear me, I need to acknowledge the pain and the suffering that they're going through and their fears. You start with acknowledging the pain and their fears, and then we can have a conversation about, let me tell you who I am. Let me tell you about the students I get to work with day in and day out. And even the most conservative of them all have usually agreed with me that we need a common sense solutions, that they want to see solutions for dreamers and their families who have been living here for many, many years. So that's something that I'm hopeful that it's a lot of work. It's going to be probably not solved in this election cycle, but for those good people that care about immigrants, that care about their country, we need to make sure that our elected officials are held accountable for solutions, not only for fear mongering.
Well, and that comes back full circle to what you were saying about the importance of vision. And you said something that I wrote down because I loved it so much. You said, success is a scary word when you're doing this work. Because, and what I took away from what you said about that, so tell me if you meant this differently, is there's a bunch of stuff behind that. One, the work is never really done. So, there's always going to be a new frontier in making sure that all people are treated as human first. And so the work's never really done. There's failure on the way to success, and the stakes are so high. And so I think that really dovetails really nicely with what you were just saying about not getting lost maybe in the very politicized narrative and staying grounded in what motivates you to do the work in the first place.
For sure. I mean, I think that it takes a lot of humility to do this work, and it takes a lot of compassion, and it's not only towards others, but it is towards yourself, because I am human too. I know that I'm going to fail. I know that I'm not going to get everything right. And I just pray every day that I can be a model and I can be a beacon of hope for other people around me. And that's all I can control. I can control how people will feel. I can control how people will react, but I can definitely control how I show up in this world. And I hope that inspires or really questions other folks when they're thinking about that, and really asking that question, am I operating from a place of fear, or am I operating of a place of love and hope?
Yeah. Reyna, thank you so much. Before we wrap up, I want to ask you some sort of quick questions on behalf of our wonderful listeners. If people are listening who are so inspired and want to really help stand side by side with you and drive change, what is one resource that you might offer them, a place they might go to learn more about the issue that you're working on and the work that you do?
I would definitely encourage them to follow us in social media at Aliento AC. We also have a podcast. We put a lot of toolkits. If you are in your journey of becoming an ally, or you're just curious about what is this whole Prop 308, or what is this whole thing about immigration? Maybe you're thinking about, I really want to have this conversation with my family at the dinner table because I've been hearing them having really interesting narratives about immigrants. Come to us. You don't have to do all the research. You're not alone. We always put toolkits out there for you to engage and for you to learn more.
I love that. And what is a different way of thinking? What's a different thought pattern or perspective that people might try on to challenge some of their own thinking around issues related to immigration?
Something that I often think about with immigration, we think that sometimes it's something so foreign, or people have this perceived notion that maybe in a place, especially within the US, that people said well, my community did it the right way. My great grandpa did it the right way. And I think that there's a huge misconception that there's a line. I just want you to think about that the last time that we have through immigration reform was 1986. That was before I was born. So that's just to put it in context. And an invitation that I have for you to think differently is to digging internally first. Really learn about your own migration history. Maybe you have moved houses. That's a type of migration. Maybe you have moved states, or maybe you have had the courage to move on from a country to another country. Really think about why were some of the reasons that created that move, and really dig deeply about historically in time, what were some of those maybe policies that allow you to do it, and how they might be completely different in current times.
I love that. And then lastly, what is something that people can do? How can they take action to make a difference?
If people are voters in the state of Arizona, there is a proposition this election cycle called Proposition 314. If you are outside of Arizona, if you know anybody in Arizona, you can also utilize your social media if you don't know anybody to create awareness about Prop 314. It's a misguided, it's an unfunded mandated force that is really trying to pretend that we're solving a problem in the name of voter security without actually solving the problem. So Prop 314 will have tremendous consequences, not only for immigrants in Arizona, but for also people that live here, that we have seen time after time that we're going to be creating a bad reputation. We don't have to imagine that. We lived that through SB 1070 almost 15 years ago, when we had major events being pulled away because of the bad reputational damage that Arizona created nationally and globally. So I encourage everybody to take action, to learn about Prop 314. And if you want to know what my stances are, I'm definitely not supporting it. I cannot vote because I'm a DACA recipient. So if you cannot vote just like me, you also have the power to influence and to talk to your neighbors, to your friends, to your family members who are citizens, who are registered voters, to ensure that they take a stand, and then they stand with the immigrant community and vote no on Prop 314. So that will be something so tangible that it'll be this November 5th. But also, if you want to just continue to learn more and be in community with immigrants, and if you are local here in Arizona, we are having an art gallery on September 26th. So go check out our social medias and come and celebrate the joy and the resilience of the immigrant community.
Amazing. Reyna, thank you so much, not only for being here today and for sharing your wisdom and your story with us, but also for your fearless advocacy. I am so grateful. I think you said in the conversation that you can't control what other people do, but you can control what you do. And I think that just the passion and the authenticity that you do your work with is really, truly inspiring. So I'm very, very grateful to you. And thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for all the work that you do, and the inspiration and admiration is mutual.
I hope that you enjoyed that conversation as much as I did. Reyna is just such a special, powerful individual who makes an impact not only on the macro level, but the micro level, just because she shows up authentically who she is every single day. And it was just my honor to get to work, to talk to her. And I really encourage you to go back and listen again to what she invited you to learn, to think, and to do, especially her invitation to think differently and think about your own experiences as a migrant or an immigrant, moving, making big changes for your family, and how that might change your perspectives on the immigrant experience, the issue of immigration. And it is definitely going to be, it already is, such a huge issue in our election this year. And I think that everything that Reyna shared and the work that she does gives us great opportunity to think a little differently and challenge our perspectives. So thank you to Reyna. Thank you to you. And until next time, when I cannot wait to share another story of change, have a great one.